Hello, I'm Ian, and this is Somerset News Network. I've been looking at websites and watching YouTube videos and other social media sites, trying to find out what's happening in Ukraine. Now, as far as I understand, put comments down below if you think I'm wrong. Ukraine is losing. That's the basic premise of it all. I said in my last Ukraine video that Russia was fighting with one hand tied behind its back because it sees Ukraine as its cousin. But I think the gloves have come off now. Since the drone strike on the airfield and the hyper-missile attack on Kiev on the NATO missile dumps, underground dumps that blew up, I'd like to be able to show the video. One, there's copyright problems, and the other one is some of it is a bit too graphic for YouTube, so I'm only going to speak this, and you'll have to do your own research and find out for yourself. Now, we are being told by the mainstream media that Ukraine is winning the war against Russia. Do you trust the mainstream media? The evidence doesn't show that. The Americans gave Ukraine their Patriot system, which is the anti-missile defense system. And yeah, it was working for a while. But like all things in war, things change. You get new inventions. Trump has decided that he's not going to send any more anti-missile missiles, if that's the right expression to use, the Patriot system, to Ukraine anymore. And everybody's up in arms, he's withdrawn help. But if the system is not working, what's the point in sending it? It turns out, looking at independent military analysts, are saying that Russia has developed new missiles that track the radar of the Patriot system and blow them up. The other thing that they've done is the Patriot system can't log on to the incoming missiles. The missiles have either got a jamming system or they can't see them from the radar. They got anti-radar coating on them. Don't know. But this is what the military analysts are telling us. And the idea of warfare that we had from the First World War to the Iraq War to Afghanistan and the Falklands, the idea of war and how you conduct a war has totally changed. We got modern technology come in, and the Russians are changing the way they conduct a war. Now, when we started off, and there was the just basic conflict, the Russians hadn't really got their act together. Like I said, they were fighting with one hand behind their back because they thought they were the cousins and they thought there was going to be a peace deal and all the rest of it. The Crimean south area of Ukraine, they've already taken. They had a referendum there that said they wanted to remain linked to Russia because they're mainly Russian-speaking people. That started off because militia groups within Ukraine were attacking the Russians to try and ethnically cleanse them out of the area. That's how this war started. Zelensky took power after we think the CIA constructed a coup against the last president. So we got a CIA puppet in, and they're linked with the EU and NATO and Biden. Trump, totally different kettle of fish. He wants to stop the war. He sees that Russia can win, or has already won. So to start with, they stopped the intelligence to Ukraine to try and get a peace deal. He had Zelensky in his office and basically read the Riot Act to him. But you've got France, Germany and Britain and Canada, the coalition of the willing, who are prepared to supply Ukraine with bombs and bullets. Our Defence Secretary said on some news channel that we have sent 1,000 drones to Ukraine. Like I said in my last video, were those drones used to attack the aircraft on the airfield? I don't know the answer, I'm posing the question. Now, let's get back to the war. The Russians have changed their tactics. They're using drones. So they got drones as eyes in the sky, and they're mapping the battlefield. They're then using kamikaze drones, they call them. You know, they're just going to go straight in and bomb something. So bunkers where Ukrainian soldiers are, they go straight in, boom. Anything moving, military transport, is drone, boom. What the Russians do is they bring in their artillery, and they use the artillery on an area, which is what we did during the Second World War. But this is the clever bit. It turns out military analysts are saying what they don't do is go forward in a battalion which gives the Ukrainians targets. They hang back and they use small units of men to go forward. They use the eyes in the sky in the drone, and they direct the small units of men, and sometimes it's as low as only three men, but it could be 4 or 6, and they take an area, and then they use a drone to attack the Ukrainians or the more artillery, so that their men don't come under direct fire. Now, last year, the ratio, I'm sorry about talking about kill ratios, but the kill ratio from the UN side, from allegedly our side, I don't think it's our side anyway, I think they're globalists, elites anyway, they haven't got our interest at heart. They said that the kill rate was 4-1, 4 Ukrainians to 1 Russian. Then it became 7-1. Now they reckon the kill rate is 20-1. 20 Ukrainians to every Russian. I know it's a horrible thing to talk about, but we've got to look at it and say, hang on a minute, how long can this go on? We now find that Starmer wanted to send British troops to Ukraine. Oh, peacekeepers they called them. Peace deal fell through and it never happened. But we think Starmer has been told, there's sort of rumours on the internet, that Starmer has been told he can't use British troops without the consent of Parliament, which is true. But with all these rumours, you don't know exactly what's going on. But I expect that's reasonably true. Now Starmer's got a 100-year deal with Ukraine. And the deal is for the rare earth minerals. Now, when you look at the document, it doesn't say anything about rare earth. That was only what the mainstream media told us. What the deal says is that we will buy grain from Ukraine, and we will boycott and find grain that is made on the Russian area in southern Ukraine and confiscate it from the Russians when they try and sell it abroad. How are they going to do this? They say they're going to use biomarkers. So they're going to test the grain, and the grain is going to have biomarkers in the DNA of the seed. Don't know how true that is, but that's what the document says. I've done it on here and said what it is. I've done it about a month ago, I think. So Trump has got a deal with Ukraine for the same rare earth minerals. Well, who's going to win that fight? I've said it before. You know, Starmer said, oh, I got this deal. He got a deal with the EU, didn't he? We were told that. But the Supreme Court said that the deal can't go through unless it's okayed by Parliament. Parliament has to okay it, and it hasn't. Therefore, it's dead in the water. The Patriot system isn't working, so Trump isn't sending it. He's not going to send any more Patriots over because they know they're just going to get blown up. But like I said, I was talking about, I go off on tangents, you know me. They use small units and go forward. They don't produce targets for the Ukrainians. And they move forward. And they're taking village after village. Yesterday they reported they took 11 villages. They go on the outskirts of the village. They try and let the locals go as refugees. And then they attack the military forces within the village. Small towns, small villages. And the Russians are slowly creeping in from the east and going west. I reckon that by September they'll be on the outskirts of Kiev, if this keeps going the way it's going. Zelensky should have got a peace deal when Trump tried to do it. But the warmongers of the military complex, the world elites as they are, they're involved with all the people that make the bombs and bullets. As long as they can keep the war going, they can keep selling Ukraine bombs and bullets. But Ukraine has defaulted on a 400 million plus deal that they've got to the IMF. So the IMF's involved as well, which ends up being the World Bank. This is all complicated stuff, I know, but I'm trying to make it simple so I understand it. Russia is going to take over Ukraine, and that's all there is to it. I think from Kiev down, going south, I think Russia will control the whole area by September, if it keeps going on the way it's going. But you say, now, hang on a minute. Germany is going to put 50,000 troops into Ukraine. How long is it going to take to train them? Are they still being trained on standard NATO exercises that they do? With the new Russian tactics, how long will they last? And all you're doing is throwing Putin a PR, gold mine for him. Because all Putin will say is, remember Stalingrad, when the Germans, they surrounded Stalingrad and fought there in the frozen weather and lost and had to pull back. Ukraine in the Second World War saw the biggest tank battle on the same ground they're fighting on now. The Russian T4 tank beat the Germans. With all the technology the Germans had at the time and how well engineered the Tiger tanks were, didn't last. The Russian tactics won that battle in Ukraine area. But we sent our tanks out to Ukraine, they tell us. Send the Chieftain tanks. Yeah, it's a good tank. 70 tons. It's a big tank. There was an article in one of the newspapers I read, and they were talking to a tank commander. And he said, oh yeah, they're good tanks, but they're not any good on our soil. It's too heavy and we can't drive around. So they're using them as mobile artillery units. So they're not there to back up the infantry, which they should be, because they can't drive them on the soil. See, that's where the T4 managed, because the Russians' tank, the T4, was a lighter tank and could drive on the ground easier than the Tiger tanks. Same problem. Now, what are we going to do? We have got to get peace. That's all there is to it. The Russians are slowly going to creep. Trump knows this. But we got Starmer, Macron, and now the new German Chancellor, and they're going to war. I hope we don't see British troops in Ukraine. I think they're just going to end up coming back in body bags. Anyway, I reckon we ought to give peace a chance and strive for peace and stop this stupid, endless war. Anyway, Ian, bye-bye for now.